Good afternoon. That's not mine. Okay, while this is set up, I'd like just to start about these two decrees. The two decrees that were passed earlier in January, I think they have received much more attention than they deserve. They are important, but we have given them much more attention. And I think the reason has been the delay. And people have been speculating whether the delays were due to the fact that the content of these decrees is being disputed by the various political parties, etc. Personally, I do not think this is the case. The delay was not due to the content of the decrees. It was due to other political reasons and perhaps external factors that were pressuring Lebanon not to pass the decrees. But we do have the decrees now. So let's look at the content of the decrees in a very concise manner. First, what are these decrees? I think some of you already know. These include one, Decree number 42 of 2017, which divided the offshore blocks into 10 blocks, and two, Decree number 43, which introduced a tender protocol for the first licensing round, and the model EPA. The EPA is the agreement by which the government will grant rights to international oil companies. Let's first start with the model EPA, a very quick review of the main instruments. Where does it fit internationally? How do we qualify the EPA in comparison with other international regulations? Let's start. In terms of general regulatory frameworks, we have mainly a concession system, the licensing system in the world, and we have something called contractual system. Okay? Two very distinct regulatory systems. In the concession system, we have what is called a license. And if we summarize, the license has three main types, characteristics. One, under the license, the contractor, the oil companies, they own the oil, and that's important. They own the oil once it is extracted. Two, they own the infrastructure. And three, the involvement of the government is limited in terms of monitoring the operation or being involved in the operation. So these are the three main characteristics of a license. We don't have that system in Lebanon, but that system exists in the UK, in Norway, and other countries. Okay? That's number one. The other systems that exist are contractually based. Foremost, they include the production sharing contract. The production sharing contract or production sharing system, which is the model that Lebanon has selected. Under that model, in summary, the oil is not owned 100% by the oil companies, as it is in the licensing system. The infrastructure is not owned by the oil companies, as it is in the licensing system. It is owned by the government. And third, and importantly, the government may have direct involvement in the operation. Again, in contrast with the licensing system. That's the production sharing system, okay? And the third one, which is also contractual, is the service contract, which would be applicable in countries which have a national oil company that have advanced technologies, have enough financial resources like Saudi Arabia, Aramco, etc. They grant a service contract rather than the other two. So this is, I hope this is clear. Now, in terms of the financial obligations within a production sharing contract, which is similar to what we have in Lebanon, let's go through them in a quick list. First, we have bonuses. A bonus can be paid upon signature of the contract. For instance, in Iraq, the signature bonus was $500 million in one of the contracts, in cash, $500 million upon signature of the contract, because they have existing resources. In Lebanon, at least in the first licensing round, we will not have a bonus, but this might be introduced later. The second thing is the royalty, l'atawa. Royalty is set a certain percentage of the production that goes directly to the state even before we start paying any cost or any other profit, whatever it is. So the first thing, royalty. It could be 4% for gas. It could be from 5 to 12% for oil. Okay? The third thing is something called cost oil. And this is important. This is at the heart of the production sharing system. What it means is that we take a certain portion of the oil or gas and we recover costs. So the cost of the operator, let's say the contractor has spent $1 billion on the project. From the production each year, we take a certain portion to cover the costs. And this is called the cost oil. And that item can be agreed in the contract, and we'll see in a bit how it is in Lebanon. But in short, it's a biddable item. So the company is bidding in Lebanon. Now they will have to say to the government how much are they willing to cap their cost oil. And the ceiling that is set by the existing regulation is 65%. So they cannot take more than 65% every year to cover their costs. Any remaining costs will go to following year. So that's the cost oil. Okay? The remaining amount of oil or gas in that particular year, this would be called profit oil. And it will be divided between the state and the oil companies. Here, the ratio, the division percentage between the state and the oil companies is again defined in the contract and a biddable item. So the companies bidding in Lebanon will have to say how much they are willing to give the government a stake from the profit oil. Okay? And this percentage is not fixed. It will grow to the benefit of the government, to the state, throughout the project once the profitability of the project increases, okay? Based on something called the R factor, which you can look up if you like. We don't have time to focus on that. But so that's the PSC. So we have the royalty being paid to the government before any cost is deducted. Then we have the cost oil. We deduct the cost oil up to a certain limit. In Lebanon, it could be 65%. Then whatever quantity that we have will be divided between the state and the companies. In addition, the final piece of revenue for the state is that the petroleum taken by the companies will be subject to tax, whether there's a corporate, whether it's corporate tax or a petroleum tax in the future. This is to be seen, but this is, again, this is a revenue for the state. Well, let's go through a quick simulation to make sure that this is clear. Let's assume that we have a system. This is not a Lebanese system, but let's assume that we have a system where royalty is at 10%, where cost oil ceiling per year is 33.3%, profit oil split is 40% to the contractor and 60% to the state, and tax is at 30%. Let's see how this plays out. Let's assume that we have 1 barrel of oil, 1 barrel at $20 per barrel. That's the cost of the barrel. How would this be divided? First, we have to apply the royalty, correct? The royalty, we said it's at 10%. So we take $2, it goes to the state. Then we have, from these $18, we have to subject them to the cost oil, the cost recovery, which, as we said, it has a ceiling. So we can only take 33.3% from that oil for cost recovery. So this means $6 goes to the contractor. The remaining amount is $12. What happens with this $12? This is the profit oil, okay? And this will be divided between the state and the contractors. We said that the profit oil is 40/60. This means that 4.8 would go to the contractor and 7.2 will go to the state. So as a result of the amount that went to the contractor, they have to pay, we apply the tax, the 30% in this case. So $1.44 would again go to the state. The gross revenue in this particular example would be $9.36 to the contractor and $10.64 to the state. Okay? So although we had started with 40/60, but we're almost here at 50%, correct? Almost 50-50. But this is not the complete picture, because we have forgotten the $6 which have been invested. So actually the total revenue, the net cash flow, is $3.36 to the contractor and $10.64 to the state, which means that in total we have a take of 24% for the contractor and 76% to the state. The moral of this story is that we cannot assess the effectiveness of a regime, such as Lebanon, by looking simply at one factor. We cannot look at the profit oil and say whether this is good for the government or not. We cannot look solely at the royalty and say whether this is good or not. It has to be a complete system to understand exactly how it is profitable to the state. Okay? Now, quickly moving on to the blocks and how they were divided, which has been, in a way, it's going to be less than 5 minutes. So these are the blocks that you've seen before. This is the final map, 10 blocks. The first thing that we can see is that these blocks are not equal in size. This is something very unique to Lebanon. Usually, in the majority of jurisdictions, oil and gas jurisdictions, the division of the blocks would be equal. You'd have squares or rectangles, etc., of equal areas. But the problem that they have in these jurisdictions, other than Lebanon, is that once oil companies start operating, there's a high likelihood of discovering reservoirs that extend from one block to the other. So, assuming it was the case in Lebanon, you would have a block extending from, a reservoir extending from block number 5 to block number 6. So the same reservoir. What do you do in this situation? Would you allow both companies from both sides to extract at the same time? If we do this, this will be extremely harmful to the reservoir. And the quantities that we can extract will be much lower than the quantities we can extract if we had a single operation. So as an international standard, whenever you have a joint reservoir, you are required to operate it jointly, to unitize. What Lebanon has tried to do is, rather than dividing the blocks equally, of equal sizes, we have relied on the extensive geological data that is available, and I think Wissam covered it very lightly, that we have more than 80% of geological data. This has not been done before anywhere in the world, where you have a new jurisdiction, where there has been no exploration, no drilling, but you have 80% of the maritime territory already covered by geological data. Based on this geological data, they were able to divide the blocks in a way that reduces the risk of reservoirs extending between blocks. So hopefully, we will be, if there's a discovery, it will fall within a particular block, does not extend to the other block. Okay? This map is intended to show where does the area claimed by Israel fall within, in comparison to the blocks that we have divided. I think this is the first time you see this because I've developed this. It shows that more than 60%, at least more than 50% of block number 8 is what is disputed by Israel or claimed by Israel. Okay? And block number 10 is less than that. Now, as His Excellency had also raised the question of why these blocks, there could be various, this is something open to discussion. And I think if we are being reasonable as to how we discuss this matter, we can find that there is pros and cons that are logical. In terms of what are the advantages of licensing or opening these blocks for award in the first licensing round, is one, indirectly, we might be able to get some sort of international recognition of Lebanese jurisdiction over these blocks by the fact that international oil companies will be bidding and winning blocks here and operating here. Indirect recognition of Lebanon's right. The second thing, and more important thing, because these jurisdictions, as Wissam had mentioned, have high potential, then it is obvious that we need to be the first to start extracting before our enemies to the south do the same. Because if they do the same, and if there's a shared reservoir, as we mentioned earlier, then we're not going to have a unitization. We're not going to be working jointly with Israel. They will be extracting from their side. We will be extracting from our side. The total outcome will be much less than what we can do if we move in first. So this is a potential advantage for Lebanon for moving fast on this. Is this enough? I'll leave the rest for questions. Thank you.